us a bit of background? Like, tell me what you have been up to, like, sort of before, and like, sort of, like, what are you working on, like, right now as well?
Yep. So officially, I'm working on at ConsenSys within the Rapid team, which is we're
Hmm.
basically just prototyping different ideas that Joe kind of pushes along to us. We pick up kind of slack where maybe product teams can't pick up because they're focused on specific products, like for example the 1 million devs initiative. So that's like the official focus. But
Right.
on weekends and hackathons and other stuff, really kind of tinkering, obviously with like kind of new DeFi stuff, trying to figure out how do you integrate maybe bounties and DeFi and jobs and stuff. So when I'm not doing official ConsenSys stuff, really trying to like tinker with all the latest hype around DeFi and figuring out how that fits into our current kind of product stack.
I love that. How, like, from your perspective, since you are working, like, since you brought up the 1 million devs piece, like,
Yep.
from your perspective, what is sort of like the biggest, like, what's the 80/20 on that, like, right? From your perspective.
Yeah. So I guess after I'm talking to a lot of new developers recently, people new to the space, it's like one, there's a level of intimidation that like blockchain and cryptocurrency is complicated, and then there's also really smart people that talk really crazy language, and that's super intimidating. And then docs
Right.
are all over the place, information is all over the place. So I think just at like an 80/20 rule, it'd be really good to lower the barrier for less intimidation and just like better connecting of dots and pieces for new people. And I think if we do that, that'll like be pretty big strides towards alleviating a lot of new pain and getting like new devs into the ecosystem.
I love that. Out of, like, so whenever you say, like, sort of alleviating the pain and like streamlining the onboarding process, like,
Yeah.
what's the, like, how long do you feel like it takes, and like currently, and then like what are you kind of shooting for, and like how are you reducing that time?
Yeah. So I think I'll kind of aim for what I'm shooting for first, and then like answer the first question of how do we get there. But like, so for me, my frame of reference is I got introduced to the open source world through like Drupal and WordPress, these other like content
Yeah.
systems that became so critical to the web, and they had
Hmm.
really strong communities and really good documentation. They were all about connecting and composing different features, which I think Ethereum is starting to. But there isn't that WordPress yet, or that Drupal community, or those other things that are just like really sturdy where devs can tap into really super duper easy. So I think for
Hmm.
me, just as someone who came from that world, I would love to emulate what worked really well from the communities where I learned how to do open source stuff. And then kind of, yeah, so then using that model to bring devs in. And I think I forget a little bit your first question, so I'm going to
No,
re-ask.
I guess I was just sort of like, if it, I mean, I was asking sort of like how long does it take now versus like how long
Yeah,
does it take?
yeah, right. So I think it can take weeks and months maybe, because like we just got a couple new interns and new people on our team, and I'm really trying to take this time to see like, all right, where are your knowledge gaps? Where do we need to figure that out? And it's honestly a lot just to get a new team up to speed and coding. So it can take weeks if you have hand holding, and maybe months if you're just like by yourself.
That makes sense. I mean, and I kind of want to go back because when you said I want to emulate what made Drupal and WordPress really successful as open source projects, what do you think made those successful? Besides just sort of being like powering the web and sort of having plugins for everything.
Yeah, so I think this goes kind of back to what we talked about a little bit before. The Unity project idea that I had was why I wanted to do that because of like WordPress and Drupal, because they made it so easy to add all these different features that I needed at different points to like, if I'm building a website for a client, like I don't necessarily want to do all this low level stuff. I want to finish and get the product done and like get paid. And those open source communities allowed me to accelerate. And where there was knowledge gaps and I didn't know stuff, there was either A, really good documentation, or modules that I could just use. And so for me, it was that being able to easily tap into these existing solutions, maybe within like 30 seconds or like around there, to maybe a couple minutes to just getting all that stuff composed into one place. And I feel like Ethereum doesn't have that yet. Like Joe talks about the killer feature of Ethereum is composability, but like we haven't found that sweet spot of how do we compose everything. And I think we're getting there. That's kind of like how I frame it in terms of the Web 2.0 world and where we need to be for like Web 3.
Yep. There's like I really like we talk about like Legos with money, but I think what we're kind of missing is that Legos for infrastructure sort of thing.
Yeah. And like what's the big boards that you start putting Legos on, like the big green
Yeah.
Flats.
It's the big green base, basically,
Exactly.
is what we're missing. Yeah.
Yep.
I love that.
We're starting to get the Lego pieces. Yeah. No place to connect yet.
I love that. So I guess like one of the projects that we're asking people to sort of focus on is DeFi. Do you have like strong opinions as far as like where DeFi is the most exciting, or where you feel like it's sort of lagging, and then B, like what is the I guess like what are the pieces that are I guess missing, right? Like because you're kind of like one of your 1,000 side projects is DeFi related, correct?
Yep. Yeah, so I think where I'm most excited is probably I had a chance to meet with some of the Uniswap people last night and the Rainbow team. But so Uniswap I think is very interesting in the sense of like for the DeFi, they're actually making a truly decentralized protocol for price discovery. Where like other systems, and MakerDAO maybe has doubled down on not that approach and is maybe doing a little more centralized Oracle systems. And so I think for me, what excites me is those like truly decentralized protocols that are kind of pushing the boundaries, whether it's like Augur prediction markets or Uniswap, who's really testing out some latest stuff. They're doing a V2. I think that for me is the really important stuff to keep an eye on, because it's going to be a few of those building blocks that once they're really ready are going to time for us to like hit the gas and go. What concerns me probably is some of the bigger stuff like the compounds and other really kind of untested hypotheses of like, okay, what happens when a lot of people really do throw their money in these things? Like, that's yet to be seen. And I'm not good. I don't think it's good or bad. It's unknown for me.
It's beta. I feel like everything is like almost any of these DeFi products that you start using have a massive disclaimer at the top saying this is in beta, use it your own risk.
Yep. And then to answer the third question,
just imagine if we actually hit traction.
If you hit what?
Sorry, go. Oh, I said I apologize. There's some choppiness, so I started speaking. I was just saying, go for it.
Okay. And I think to answer your question, like 1,000 things trying to do, but like I think what most excites me is like somehow tapping some of these new DeFi protocols into I think some of the stacks that are really, or existing products that are really mature with the community, i.e. like Gitcoin, Bounties networks, where there's already developers who are getting introduced and maybe are having a small amount of money. And that seems to me to be the most optimal user base that is going to be introduced to maybe DeFi products, because after we get them jobs, after we get them bounties, after we get them other things, it naturally evolves to help them get into DeFi. So for me, I think merging those two worlds and figuring out how you get those together will be probably a really winning strategy. So that's kind of like the side project I think that deserves the most attention, because it will hopefully have the biggest impact.
I love that. Well, so when you say like some of those core components are in place, like when you and like the missing pieces, like in your opinion, what is missing from those core components? Like where is the gap?
Yeah, so I won't claim like even like great knowledge on this. It's more of an intuition sense of like, okay, we need a few more of these base level things, and it's like I think the swaps, I think of the augurs, I think of the compounds, and like. They'll help, and like the UMA, they're coming out with like these synthetic assets, and so I'm not going to claim that I've deep dived into all of them, but I feel like once we get a few more of these like mature, really decentralized protocols that don't do centralized oracles, and these teams have maybe battle hardened some of these protocols, then for me it's like a feeling like, okay, then we're all kind of ready. But I don't know if I have a great point answer.
Right. No, that totally makes sense. To kind of like broaden the conversation just a little bit, right? Like you're talking, I love how you're kind of talking, you're comparing your experience building on like open source projects in Web 2 versus Web 3. Like what is, in your opinion, like give me sort of a readout of like what developing on Web 3 is like, and the biggest differences between like building on Web 2.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So I think as of now, it still is, even though the ecosystem is more mature and Ethereum is doing really well and there's a lot of good products, it's still a lot of discovery and education. And no one has really set a good path forward that says, Well, Joe kind of touches on this, like with the trust operating system. Like you almost set a framework for what tools to use, what to put together, and paint the vision of what's possible. And so, like with WordPress, you could install a template, and right away you see what's possible. But I think with Ethereum, there's not like, hey, there's not this Trust OS, or there's not this other system where you kind of just install and see what's possible. And so there's a lot of that self-discovery and putting pieces together, which is actually a really complicated and long process. And so I think because Web 2 is a little easier at scaling right away, you have servers and stuff, and you're like, boom, ready to go. That it was easier in that world. But if we could somehow replicate that maybe in the Web3 world. That's why I'm maybe excited for like Scale, who ConsenSys just invested into, because it looks like they're kind of moving in that direction of like, I need a blockchain for a couple of months and I want to go experiment and I need it now. And you've created the whole protocol for me. Great, let's off to the races.
Right. No, I love that. That's a really interesting point. And it's almost like there's like a weird, one of the things I really like about Web 2 development is just how much more it's opened up over the last like 5 years. Like, I mean, even, like 10 years especially, but like 5 years even, right? Like I'm thinking of, I'm a really hacky, crappy coder. And I love CodePen because to me, like, this is like the most easy, like lowest barrier to entry. Just start experimenting, and start like, playing with ideas like on the front end and like kind of understanding like how these sort of different components sort of work. And you can even create like micro apps within this. And if I could wave a magic wand and like either create something out of whole cloth or like just go underground and like work on something for 2 months, it would be like CodePen for Web3. Because I think like we need that sort of sandbox, like test nets of value where people can start like grokking like why this is so cool and why this is so interesting, and then start applying it to their own lives.
Yeah, totally. I agree like 100%. I think that experimentation place is just so important. Like I was at a meetup last night with like a mixture of really hardcore like engineers, like, and then also designers and CSS people, and they're like, I love Webflow because it lets me move and get my ideas on paper and like think through this problem. And like, obviously some engineers are like, no, I want to build my own app. There's a whole segment that we don't realize that if you just let them tinker and think through a problem, they could probably really come up with some great UX stuff and really think through these things. So I totally agree. We need to like encourage and facilitate that experimentation because it could probably do a lot. So yeah, I can see the vision.
Love that. Like a Webflow for Ethereum would be amazing.
Yeah.
That would be so cool.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. So last question, just kind of on this. I really appreciate your time. What's your best and worst hackathon experience?
So I think probably the worst hackathon experience I had was the first one I went to with ETH Waterloo, and I didn't really organize. I didn't pick a team. I didn't really figure out like what the sponsors want, and I didn't go to the hackathon educated. I think in terms of like what is a good expectation to get out of it. And then afterwards, I went to a couple, but then most recently, I went to ETH Waterloo again, and I think I learned from my first one, understanding what sponsors wanted, understanding like there is value in networking there and showing, not just building what you want, but building what other people are interested in. And, I came out winning, almost 3,000 DAI. And so for me, that was a great experience going from like ETH Waterloo 1, not educated, not understanding how to really use the hackathon system to my advantage, to being like, okay, 2 years later, I think I get the system a little bit more and I know how to work with. So that was a nice evolution. And so from worst to best at ETH Waterloo.
At the same place. That's fantastic. Yeah. When you say understand what the sponsors mean, like how do you approach that now as opposed to previously?
So I think more I was just gonna be like, all right, I'll build some cool thing and maybe I'll integrate with some of the sponsors and they'll probably like my cool idea. And like
right.
But I don't know, I realized that's probably not the case and they really want to see like stuff built on their system and pushing their limits a little bit. So I think it's just understanding that the sponsors have a set of ideas that they want to fulfill and thinking like, all right, where's their product now? And like, how can I maybe push it to the edge a little bit more? And I think that's really cool at hackathons to help those teams figure out where they can push their products a little bit further.
I love that. When you like approach a hackathon, what is like that? like what are you looking for? Are you just like looking to? Is it just sort of like I want to win, or do you have like personal goals that you kind of approach it with?
Yeah, so I think for me it's always twofold now because hackathons are a great networking opportunity and so amazing.
Yeah.
Like Heat Denver is obviously a great example of that. I think it's really on that part. But then there also is this opportunity to build something cool and maybe get recognition for that. So I think the biggest takeaway is like also that networking part and making sure you get not just so focusing on the hackathon but also focusing on making sure.
Yeah, I love that. That totally makes sense. Well, that does it for my questions. I want to be like super considerate of your time because you're really generous to hop on the call. So I really appreciate it, man.
Yep. So I mean, I have a few more minutes. If you have anything else, or if you want to spitball too, I'm happy.
Oh yeah. No, I'm totally down to spitball. Like, I guess like one of the things that I'm kind of curious about if you've got time, one of the things that I'm kind of riffing on is like, I feel like there's an infrastructure that needs to be in place just in general for Web3.
Yep.
But I think there's also, to me, it's like another question, like the question I have is like, I think there's it's also a matter of like infrastructure plus vertical, right? Like,
Yes.
I think it's going to be really important to not just understand what like generically people need to build on Web3, but I think it's really important to understand like what does the next generation of DeFi look like, and
Yes.
how do we build like the tools and have that tooling in place to like make essentially like hit that next level or hit that next stride. Like, where are we seeing the pain points in demand? And I kind of had that question for like a whole bunch of different pieces, right? Like, like 2020, we hear a lot of like one of the memes going around is like 2020 is going to be the year of the DAO. Like what infrastructure needs to be in place for DAO? What infrastructure needs to be in place for like games? Like, those are like some of the questions that I've kind of been batting around. And if you've got thoughts, I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, I mean, those are really big topics. I would absolutely love to dive into the DAO one. I think that's super important. And so let's circle back on that. But I think I really just want to circle back to the beginning where you talked about that treasure trove of ideas. Honestly, I think that is the next wave because it's so people not only do they not get how blockchain works, let alone how to go compose these financial like Legos.
Yeah.
So I think setting not only these templates for code, but these templates for how to think about how to compose these bigger pieces together just makes so much sense. And so I think, circle back around. We have to identify exactly what you said, like what's needed in a DAO, spec that out a little bit, and then just make the treasure trove so all these new people can understand, like, oh, these are the essentials we need to build for a DAO, and just like let people loose on that.
Right. That totally makes sense. Out of curiosity, like when you say you're excited or interested in DAOs, like what parts of that? I mean, like, is it just in general? Are there DAOs specifically that you kind of have your eye on and you think are like really positive developments in the ecosystem? Like, where's that? Elaborate on that a little bit.
So for me, I think it stems a lot from the decentralized identity part. Like originally working with Uport and then realizing kind of like the importance of the identity as you build a DAO.
Yeah.
So for example of this, like the really big one that obviously everyone knows, the DAO failed, and it was really bad and huge headache. But now version 2, you're seeing much DAOs are actually social networks that exist. Like Moloch was a group of people that knew each other and like recognized each other, knew the faces, knew names, and you're seeing like marketing down these other things. And so for me, it seems like this human part and this identity part is actually really critical to the DAO and helping it scale and actually work. So for me, the excitingness is like there needs to be this human element to the blockchain. So really, for me, to see that next user experience level be elevated and actually work for people. So for me, that identity part and how do you implement the humanness to DAOs, to me seems like the big next challenge. That in addition to technical.
When you say the identity part, like to me, this is one of the most exciting and also one of the biggest rabbit trails that you can kind of get lost in on Web3. So when you say identity, like what do you mean? Do you mean reputation? Do you mean controlling your own data? Like kind of unpack that a little bit.
Yeah. So thank you for saying that because there's way two different levels. I think there's on chain and off chain, and those are totally different worlds. And like good examples, 3box is almost completely off chain. I mean, they don't of. They do anything on chain, but Uport still uses Etherdid for chain methods and doing linking your dids. And so I think that distinction is really important. I think I'll lean towards like the first of with the 3-box approach, where it's like nothing is on chain, but it's really just humanizing the public address. So you see a profile picture, maybe you see their history, you see what DAOs they're a part of. I think that's like level 1 of identity. It's literally just like letting people build decentralized profiles and like showing your GitHub logs or showing what other projects you've been a part of, or having a trophy case of your decentralized achievements. So like that's one level. And then the other part is maybe these on-chain protocols for like a PKI, a public key infrastructure. So you would vote on trust anchors, and those trust anchors would be an authority on chain, and maybe they could delegate authority to a new DAO or provide like they could give a signature to my wallet, and maybe my wallet would then have access to move funds within that DAO. And so I think that second layer of like an on-chain protocol is also really interesting. But it's a little more complex, and I don't know if the ecosystem is ready for that yet. And so I think the first approach of like 3-box, just identity, trophy cases, like some information profile pictures, is probably that first step.
Huh. That's really interesting. And is there kind of like so you're talking about on-chain and off-chain. It almost sounds like we're missing, like one of the most important things to sort of build up around that would be like, it's almost like protocol roll-ups, right? Like based off of wallet addresses.
Yes.
That's really cool. I like that a lot.
And I think a good demonstration or a good just reference for this is Vitalik posted a couple of days ago of like, what did we not, or the look back for the last 5 years. And he mentioned reputation on chain basically stopped in 2014, and no one's really done any research. So for me, I just think of that. Like, okay, we haven't done it in 8 years, or not, sorry, 8 years, like 4 or 5 years. And it hasn't been explored. Yeah, so we need to figure out what that protocol roll-up is and answer Vitalik's original call for on-chain reputation.
Is it? I mean, to me, like where do you see that as being like the most, like the having like the highest value in applying it to like kind of the current trends? Like to me, like the most obvious is like it's DeFi, it's like credit, it's basically where you can start like lending based off of people's reputation or people's people's reputation, as opposed to just like having over collateralized loans and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so I think that is obviously like one really big thing of just like identity in that sense of you can start giving people credit, lending money, seeing that stuff. And so that'll help scale that part of DeFi. But, and this is untested yet, but a thought that I've had, and I'm playing around with Dan Finley on MetaMask, is if you have signatures, and so a good example of this is in the new DAI, there is this function called permit. And what it allows you to do, instead of signing a transaction, you sign a message that moves your tokens to a new address. And so someone else can call that on behalf as long as you sign a message. And so suddenly, instead of spending gas, you're signing just a message, your private key, to initialize some functionality on chain. And so I think if you take this idea of a trust anchor and on-chain kind of reputation, but that entity is able to sign a message that allows you to maybe automate multiple protocol coordinations in a certain smart wallet. So for example, with Instadap, they have a smart wallet that'll handle a couple transactions, but all you have to do is click one button. So I think with like a PKI model, a public key infrastructure model, that if you wanted to scale DeFi and make the user experience better, that you could maybe use this trust protocol to automate certain user like exchanging DeFi. Like you want to connect to Compound, you want to connect to Dharma, then you want to open your CPP vault or whatever it is. You could allow this trust anchor to sign a message on behalf of all these new users, and all they have to do is submit it on chain, and it would go do that for them. So, to answer your question, I think one obviously is the credit and lending. I think we could scale on-chain transactions way better with like this trust approach and this trust protocol. Really reputation based.
That's fascinating.
So we're playing around with that idea, and maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, but I think something might be there.
You're experimenting with that with Dan at MetaMask?
Yeah, so we're talking about just how you do signed messages and then maybe have those interpreted on chain by a smart contract. And so just how would you kind of put these pieces together to make this work? Yeah, we're playing with a few different approaches of like just how you might implement this.
Huh. I love that. That's fascinating. What do I do? I just follow your Twitter to get updates on that, or?
Maybe, yeah. We started a GitHub ticket, so I have at ConsenSys/Rapid Community. But what we're going to do is we're going to make a key-based team, and then also have maybe a few other like official channels. But we want to kind of make this, and then Ethereum magicians. So we want to bring this out a little bit more and make sure other people are involved. But yeah, I'll definitely post some stuff on Twitter, and then I'll reach out to you if you're interested. I can do something.
I may ping you for that, like a link to at least like the issue or the GitHub issue or something.
Cool.
So
No, I'll send that. I'll send that later today.
Oh, that'd be fantastic. That sounds really interesting. I'm excited to see that.
Yeah, I mean, and it's like meta transactions on steroids almost. It's just like taking that approach of signing something and having it wrapped and doing it on chain. So that's maybe a good metaphor.
All right, I'm excited to see that, man.
Yeah, hopefully we'll do some cool stuff. We'll see that.
Well, this has been a blast, dude. I really
totally.
appreciate the riffing. I feel like I don't get to do that enough. This is
right?
really nice. Yeah.
I ConsenSys too. There's so many people to do it with.
There just needs to be like, I know this is the purpose of Donut, but like I feel like there just needs to be like a chat roulette, but with like crypto idea riffing.
Oh, that'd be really fun. I would love that.
Oh, that's what we should do. We should set up like an internal chat roulette, but with ideas.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah. All
right, man. Well, I appreciate your time, dude. Thank you so much, and I will talk to you later.
Cool, man. Absolutely. I'll see you in the meshiness.
Heck yeah. Well, in East Denver too, hopefully.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. You're gonna be there too.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
Sweet, man. I'll catch you there.
All right, man. Take care. Bye.
Later. Yeah.